Hello and welcome to a new episode to learn how to code in Python for absolute beginners. If this is the first time in these courses, you don't need any previous knowledge about programming to start. Go to the first video in the playlist and enjoy. Today we're going to talk about for loop. For loops are very useful for dictionaries and lists. There is a big difference between a for loop and a while loop. The while loop, the one we already know, that we learned in the previous lessons, is which is called an indefinite loop, meaning that we don't always know how many times the while loop is going to repeat itself, is going to iterate. The for loop, on the other hand, is that definite loop, meaning that we know in advance how many times it is going to execute. This is going to be very useful for lists and dictionaries. Let's take a look. We have here a list of names for each member of a crew. And this is a for loop that, when run, is going to print on the screen each name of the crew member plus, and in front of it, the word name. So the format of this is very simple. We have a for, which is never changing. Here there is a name of a variable. And then in and here in crew, we have an array, a list, any kind of iterable, meaning it's a kind of data that can be iterated through. For example, in this case, a list. Let's take a look in the whiteboard. A for loop has this format. You have for, then here you have a variable, in, and here you have a collection type, something that basically iterates like a list. And then in this area here, you have all the statements like print or whenever you want. This variable here is going to take the values included in this iterable. So for example, if here we have a variable called x, and here we have an iterable, a list of numbers that will be 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth, meaning every time the loop runs, what it does is picking up one value from this list, assign it to the variable here x, and then executing the whatever statements are here in this area. For example, in this case, if we have print x, what is going to happen is going to print all the values contained in this array, in this list, one after the other, because every time it's going to pick one value from this list, assign it to x, and this x is going to be used here in the program in any way you want. So at the end, it's going to consume basically all the values existing in this list, and at the end, it's going to finish just the loop in this part. So this block of the loop is going to execute as many times this collection type is able to iterate. This part here is called the variable, and this part here is called iterable. And the meaning of this is that this part, this object, which usually is a collection, is also an iterable object. It's an object capable of returning a value of its contents every time it is queried. We are not going to get too much into the details of this because this is a very early stage about objects and we didn't treat them before. So just think about this as a kind of data type, the collection type that you already know, the lists and dictionaries, which are able to return a value when queried. Okay, so that's why it's called iterable, because it allows this iteration of things, events happening one after the other. Based on that, we have here a crew with all the names, then the for loop, the variable, and here is the crew. And this crew, which is this list, is the iterable. And every time the loop executes, we have an F string here that we should already be familiar with. And inside the placeholder, there is the name of the variable. So it's going to be replaced, as you see here in the output, every time it runs. We can also play with this and, for example, take this part, delete this line, and replace here in crew, just directly put the list in there. It's not very friendly because it's not there's not a nice way of doing things, but I want you to just understand the point here that if I run this, the output is going to be exactly the same, because what we are passing here after the in keyword, we're passing a list. A list is an iterable, and that's why it returns a value every time it's queried inside the loop, the for loop. There is also a function called range that we can use. For example, range run 1 to 10. And here we can replace this, for example, by value, to give a more meaningful name to the variable. We could also leave name, but it wouldn't be nice. Value. Let's clean here the output and run this again. So you can see, well, let's remove name because it wouldn't make any sense. Let's run this and we have 1, 2, 3, and 2, 9. Range is a function that will return an iterable with as many elements as we specify here in the range. So in this case, it's from 1 to 10. So it's going to iterate this 9 times. What is going to happen with a dictionary? Well, for example, let's say that we have here a dictionary with a key that is the number in English and the equivalent in Japanese, translating every number in English into Japanese. So if we here try to run the same kind of for loop in the same way as we did with the list, we will get only the keys. And that's the way basically a dictionary naturally operates when it is implemented in a for loop. It's going to return an iterable, and this iterable will contain all the keys. With this in hand, we can actually use this k variable, which is going to be the key, to query the dictionary. So j numbers. And in this way, we will have the output as the values of those keys, which is the correspondent of that number in Japanese. Another way of doing this is a function called values, which is going to return just the values of the dictionary. So, for example, let's remove this k and put values here. If we run this, we're going to get the same result as before, but the difference is that here the values function is going to return an iterable already with the values, so we don't have to query the dictionary every time as we did before. Can we get the keys and the values at the same time? Yes, we can. By that, we need to use a function called items. This function is going to return 2 values in a data format, in a data type that we still didn't learn, and we will learn in the next lesson. But for now, let's put here keys, key, and value. So we can replace this, and we can imagine already what is going to happen here. We have an F string, for example, and say in English, and we have key, and we have Japanese, and we have value. By doing this way, we are using the F string, and the placeholder is going to be the key and then the value. If we run this, we will have a more friendly output when we have the English word is here on the left and the Japanese word here on the right. So as you can see, a for loop is going to make our lives easier when we want to query a list or a dictionary. In the next episode, we are going to learn about 2 new data types, tuples and sets. Thank you for watching.